In this episode, we're going to explore why the quality of your life has absolutely nothing to do with your circumstances. Stay tuned. Welcome to Follow the Calling.
Be confident in knowing how to get the results you want.
Be secure in knowing who you really are.
Be inspired by the possibility of the difference you're here to make.
Follow your calling and experience true fulfillment. So welcome to another episode of Follow the Calling. And today we're going to talk about empowerment and circumstances, and really speak into and explore, if we're going to allow our life circumstances to influence us, it's really important that we do so in an empowering way. So empowerment is something that we believe every single human being has the right to experience for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, empowerment comes from knowing who you are, right? Empowerment comes from knowing who it is you're called to be in the face of whatever it is that shows up in your life. It's what gives you the ability to stand in the eye of the storm, so to speak, in the midst of chaos, and still have access to taking what we would term as aligned action.
Right, because the only way that you can really make a difference in any situation is to take action. And the thing that is going to determine the quality of your results is actually the kind of action that you're taking. So to take aligned action means that no matter what the circumstances are that you're facing, that you're continuously moving through life in the direction of your highest vision. And that just brings us to talking about a couple of really, incredible people who we feel like actually have taken this on for themselves in a very, I guess I can't really speak to how natural it was. It occurs as it was very natural because we know the stories, right? But one of those people is Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
So what I feel in knowing the story of his experience is that he had a calling. There was something inside him that was calling him. And what I see in Martin Luther King is that he had the courage. He had the courage to articulate that. He had the courage to follow the path of the calling. And speak his vision into the world.
Yeah. I mean, and that was against all odds, right? Because his vision was, at the time, you could say that it may have seemed incredibly far-fetched. It was absolutely not what the world looked like. And it was something by which he probably wasn't entirely certain or sure was possible to bring about in his lifetime. And yet, in everything he did, he dedicated himself entirely to taking action and moving forward every day with everything he did towards this highest vision, towards his dream, as he would have put it. When he said, "I have a dream," that was his vision. And then he articulated that to the world in a way that just lit people up, in a way that inspired people, rather than manipulating people into convincing them that something is right and something else is wrong. He inspired them in a way that they saw his vision as their own vision. And therefore, that a movement was sparked, a movement was created, and change came about, great change came about. And I think that a lot of that...
And the stakes were really high. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, sure, right. So,
Sorry.
Yeah, the stakes were really high, of course. I mean, he really put himself on the line. He really did put himself on the line. I mean, he's literally, his life was at risk, really. And I'm sure he knew that. he was talking about such a peaceful potential, a peaceful possibility, but amidst so much violence and chaos. So yeah, the odds were entirely stacked against him. It absolutely would. And this is when we talk about what we're going to talk about today, is like circumstances, right? And how circumstances can have you limit what you believe is and isn't possible. If you believe that your circumstances determine who you are and what's possible, then they will limit you. Right?
Right. I mean, really, how easy would it have been for him to have a dream and not do anything about it?
Oh God.
Not articulate it because of what other people might think, or because of what he knew the response would be.
Oh yeah.
And the reason that this story is so important is because it is, gosh, I don't even, the 1% of people who are living their life in that way. And we are a stand for having more people live into their calling, to follow their calling, to feel empowered by their circumstances rather than disempowered by them and trapped in a box for their whole life with a dream that never sees the light of day, that never sees outside of their thinking.
Yeah, I think something that's really key for me there is, and I feel important to distinguish in this conversation as well, is that, people who are living unconditionally into a possibility, and that's irrespective of their circumstances, but they also use their circumstances to empower and help them. So circumstances are there to help them rather than hold them back, but their vision, the possibility that they hold in their heart and in the way that they live their life, has nothing to do with the circumstances, really. It's not based in circumstances. It doesn't depend on circumstances. Right. Like we said, Martin Luther King, his dream didn't depend on the world being a certain way for him to be moving towards that dream. In fact, the world was absolutely not that way, and that was why the dream was so important to have. The dream, the vision, whatever we're going to call it, And it is who we are is not determined by our circumstances. Who we are is determined by how we respond to our circumstances. And I think that's the key thing here, and that's how we can have circumstances empower us, because it's how we are in response to them that determines who we are. Which,
really brings us to another group of people, because like you're saying, the quality of your circumstances do not determine the quality of your experience.
Sure.
And if that were true, and I think that a lot of people believe that that's true, right? A lot of people held back by that. There's so many levels of this, right? I don't have any time. I don't have any money. I'm not the right size. I don't have the relationship that I want. I'm not married. I don't have a house. I don't have the job that I want.
Yeah. And we could go on, right? On.
There are so many things that are holding people back from pursuing what they feel called to do. And if it were true, though, that the quality of our circumstances determined the quality of our experience, we would have no Oprah. We would have no Steve Jobs.
No.
And we would have no J.K. Rowling either. And many, many others. Like, these are just
millions.
Some examples of people.
I think you could probably say that anyone who's done anything great really has probably, the reason it's determined great is because it's been achieved against all odds. And against all odds means that the circumstances don't look as though they favour the outcome. You know, the outcome that actually happened. I mean, you can look at all sorts of examples. Another one that comes to mind as well is Richard Branson, you know, an extremely successful billionaire that started his business from a telephone box in the street. You know, he didn't even have a phone in or an office. He was running it from a telephone box. And this, you know, who would have thought that it was possible to go from where he went, from where he was to where he went? And the same, like you say, with Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, she had an incredibly traumatic, horrific childhood. Mm-hmm. Who would have thought that she would become the billionaire that she has become, with the empire, making such change in people's lives that she's been making?
Right. The thing that really stands out for me there is, like, does anybody really believe that she thought she would be doing what she's doing?
Right.
Now, I imagine that somewhere along the line, you know, this reality that she's living now became more of a tangible possibility for her. Mm-hmm. But when she was a kid growing up and early in her career,
right,
the only thing, and again, you know, we don't know, we haven't had that conversation with Oprah, but what I imagine is that she had the feeling that there was more for her. Mm. She had the feeling that there was more for her, and she kept following that, as unreasonable or unrealistic as it seemed, because something was pulling her forward. And this is what we're talking about. Yeah. You and I both had that feeling.
Absolutely. And that's what it is to follow the calling, right? To follow the calling is to follow that knowing in your heart. It's that knowing who you are, but it doesn't mean you know where that's going.
Right.
Right. But it's just literally to follow that feeling, to follow that knowing you have in your heart about who you truly are. I'll say it again. And that really only, I believe anyway, certainly in my experience, can only be done one step at a time. And it's just like the next step, and then we get feedback from the situation, and then we know within ourselves, if we're not looking to control the outcome, we're looking to follow the calling, we know that we then know what the next step is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not to predict the outcome, it's not to have expectations about the outcome, it's purely just to follow that knowing that you have day by day, moment by moment.
And to do that, there has to be a level of trust, which I think is a thing that most people are also missing, which is why they don't do that, which is why, you know, the greatest ideas and the greatest people, which I think is in everyone, never see the light of day. Or, you know, maybe people keep searching and searching, trying to figure out what that thing is for them because they don't feel clear about what that is.
Yeah.
And the only way to know what that is to trust and keep following. Well, I won't say that's the only way to know what that is exactly. But there's still an element of trusting and continuing to follow, because what that does, and this is where I really wanted to go there, is it gives you evidence. But if you don't ever start following that, if you don't ever allow yourself to see what's on the other side of following that, then you will never have the evidence that proves that you're moving in the direction of fulfillment, is what I would say.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about in terms of making a move in the direction that your heart is pulling you to go. And then the world gives you feedback, you know, you get feedback from the situation. And that's exactly what I mean from that. You know?
Right. So there's an element of trust that Oprah and Steve Jobs and J.K. Rowling had to have in order to keep pursuing that calling.
Yeah. I suppose like what that comes down to, what that actually is that when we talk about believing in ourselves, right? That's really what we mean when we say that term, isn't it? It's like, it's having the trust to keep following what you feel is true for you, irrespective of what the world looks like out there,
or what the world is telling you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what the world looks like, what the world's telling you to do. Yeah, because the point is that what's right for you is right for you. It's not meant to be right for anybody else or the world, and that's absolutely perfect because everybody is unique.
And it can be so scary because it's unknown.
Yeah.
Because we can start down a path and we can feel so drawn to and connected to that, and yet we don't know how that's going to turn up. But what we do know, right, is that maybe we go to a job every day and we get a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. And in our case, we don't even know that.
Right. Well, but we have known that. And that's what I'm saying is what keeps people stuck. It's what keeps people from taking the courageous step of even beginning to trust that they have that feeling for a reason.
Yeah.
But the only way to do that is to take the first step and then to get the feedback and see what happens.
And then to take the next step. Yeah.
It's about having the courage to take that first step. And the more you do that, the more you build that trust.
Yeah.
The more the possibilities seem possible.
Mm. Do you know what? It brings a quote to mind, actually, that I remember reading of Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister that led Great Britain through the Second World War. He said, winning is not winning and losing. Sorry, no, he said neither winning nor losing are final. What really matters is to have the courage to keep going.
Yes.
And in a way, that's perfectly speaks to what we're talking about, isn't it? It's just having the courage to keep moving in the direction you feel pulled to go, that follows your heart's calling, irrespective of the circumstances that are surrounding you. But of course, your circumstances aren't something to be ignored. They're absolutely there for you. But what we're saying here is the calling and the following of it do not in any way depend on your circumstances, whether you, like we say, whether you have enough money, enough time, enough energy, whether you have the relationship you want, whether you're living where you want, whatever your circumstances look like, have nothing to do with what is and isn't possible for you.
Right.
How do you see this panning out for yourself here, Tiffany? Like, how can you see this occurring from your life? Yeah.
So I will probably say this 1,000 times on this podcast.
Right.
That I have always known that there was more for me in life.
Yeah.
I started out my adult career in nursing. Which was something that I already knew that I didn't want to do. And then I spent a long time searching and looking for what more was.
Yeah.
And a way to do something that felt meaningful to me. And I just spent a lot of time taking more courses and getting certifications, just hoping that the next thing would be the thing that would carry me into a new space. Yeah. Into
finally give you the answer to what more is, right? That feeling of more. What is that feeling? We follow it, don't we? But sometimes the point is we can get locked into chasing it, can't we?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's there, but it's like, what is it exactly? And I had an inkling, like, it wasn't like I was just, jumping from, these are going to be absurd examples, but like from, accounting to horse racing or something like that. Yeah, right. I wasn't, taking an accounting course and then taking a horse racing course. Like, there was a theme of the things that I was interested in, but, but nothing really felt like it stuck. And so I was just continuously chasing this thing, trying to figure it out, hoping and wishing, and then I had the opportunity to uncover my purpose in life, to uncover my core values, to, articulate what my highest vision is and state a mission statement for my life. And, that experience in and of itself was very powerful.
Absolutely. Especially if you're coming from a place of you're trying this, you're trying that, you're trying this, you're trying that, and nothing seems to be really landing or sticking with you. To be able to then go to a place where you're articulating the highest vision for your life, that's some difference you're talking about right there. But then, of course, that's the power of that process, right?
Right. So, for me, this is one of the ways that I feel like it's one of the biggest ways, I will say, that I feel like I became empowered by my circumstances, by my life experience, because it's part of the whole process. Who you are is always who you are, who you've been. Maybe that's what I'll say. Who you are is always who you've been. And to look back through your life and reflect in that space is to be able to uncover that for yourself. And so that is where I really, like in uncovering my values, especially, was where I could see that my whole life has had meaning. Yeah, right. Where I didn't see it before.
Of course. So all of the tough times that just seemed to be this random, senseless kind of suffering that you went through and you got through the other side somehow, all of a sudden now that takes on meaning and it gives you a fresh perspective as well on the future, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because in all of those experiences, I found myself. And maybe that sounds like sort of an obscure thing for somebody who hasn't been through the process, but that is really what I feel. It's like, oh, there you are. That it's and that feeling that there's more, I really believe is a call home. It is the thing inside us that is calling us home continuously. And so to be able to, after getting my purpose statement and knowing what my core values are and all of these things, I had an understanding of who I am beyond what I've ever understood about myself up to that point. And that gave me access to begin to reconnect with who I really am. And to lean into that, and this feeling of more, which is what I believe that is, it's the thing that's calling me to be in alignment with who I am, who I really am.
Who you really are, yes.
I don't remember what I was going to say about that.
That feeling of more is really, in a way, that's kind of the flip side of knowing who you are, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like there's a knowing there, but it's like you don't know what you know.
Right.
So there's a feeling exactly there. Right. You know something, but you just don't know what it is you know. And then when you go through the process of uncovering your life's purpose and the highest vision for your life and your core values, it then brings all of that in alignment with everything that's happened in the past and who you were in response to those situations,
right?
And the possibility for the future as well. And it brings it all into a place where there's meaning, where suffering is no longer this senseless, random thing, right?
Right. Yes. And there's an element of grace and acceptance and compassion that you can have with yourself, and knowing that as well. So to kind of wrap this up for me, it's to give you some time to do that as well. But I feel like in getting my purpose and my values and stuff, it unlocked who I really am inside of me, began to help me to reconnect with what that is and to know, to begin to remove the doubt. So that courage that we were talking about before,
to follow the calling.
Yes. That courage was like, I had something based in evidence to move toward.
Yes.
And it didn't take as much courage for me to do it after that. Although, still a lot. So where I want to leave this is after having that, and I really believe it was working inside without me knowing that things were happening. But my life began to change dramatically. And one of the biggest things that came, around a year or so after uncovering all of this, uncovering who I really am for myself, was that I decided to leave an 18-year career in nursing.
Yeah.
At a time when I just bought a new car. I had very little in savings. I had, was paying rent on a property that I hadn't, like in the few months before that, been doing. So I had all of these new expenses, and it felt like the most ridiculous, irresponsible time for me to consider quitting my job and I will say quitting my career, because I never intended to go back to it. And I have actually let my nursing license lapse, which is something that I've wanted to do for like 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
So, I left my career and I stepped into really committing to following my calling.
Yeah.
And that really, leads us to where we are today. But I don't want to go into that just yet, because I want to give you an opportunity to share, from your perspective, what it looks like to utilize your circumstances in an empowering way and to follow your calling.
Well, I mean, my story is, in a way, it really is very parallel to yours. I come out of school not knowing what I wanted to do. I had no real idea. I was drifting from job to job. Jobs were things that just got money for me. I was never really engaged with them, and I was very aware of that. And I wished I had something that I just loved doing, and I just couldn't find it in that way. And I was like going from job to job, trying to find that, there was this feeling of more. This isn't it. No, this isn't it. And, that went on for long enough to me to start to feel like I'm never going to find it. It felt to me, I've said this before as well. I felt a little bit like a donkey chasing a carrot. There was like this feeling out in front of me that and it really did feel like I was chasing it. And the more I ran, the more it ran away from me. It felt like I was never going to reach the target, because whenever I moved, it moved, right? Now, it felt like, that's what I mean. There was a moving target. Mm-hmm. So I just couldn't hit it. I couldn't arrive home with that sense of fulfillment and feeling like, this is it. This is who I am. This is where I belong in terms of my career. And that was having a big effect on my family life. It made me deeply unhappy over a long period of time. And it was no good. And I knew that, and it had to be sorted. And in uncovering my purpose and my values, what it's done for me is very much the same. It's given me the perspective of understanding who I am called to be, and what my vision is, and what that calling is, what that feeling is for me. And then basing that in evidence of dating right back to when I was a child, the evidence that in looking back with the right perspective, the right patterns are spotted, where you actually understand who it is you've been being all this time. Mm-hmm. And for me, it just gave me focus, and it gave me direction, and it gave me an unwavering commitment to following my calling. This is why we started this podcast, because in like creating the Polaris game, we were effectively there creating what we needed, what we felt we needed the most to support ourselves in our own growth. That was initially a response to what we needed the most. And that was informed entirely, for me at least, by my purpose and my values.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really important to say here, we really believe that a goal is a place to come from, not a place to get to.
Yeah.
And
that's key.
It is key. It is key.
Yeah.
And that there is an opportunity for us to actually have a conversation with life. It's like you were saying earlier about just following what you feel pulled to do, one step. You don't need to know all 50. You don't need to know all 110,000. You don't
need to know the outcome at all. You don't need to know the
outcome.
You just need to know the first step.
And then to follow that. And then to get feedback from the situation, and follow what you feel pulled to do next. Follow what feels expansive. And this is what we mean by having a conversation with life, because I think what a lot of people do, right, is we decide, well, I'm here and I want to be there. And so how am I going to get there? Steps 1 through 10. And this is what it looks like. And effectively what that does is that has you putting blinders on. And then when you only get to steps 1.5 and you're already not following through with what your plan was, then you begin to beat yourself up for that. But what we would say is that's all information. It's all information.
It's all for you. Absolutely. And this is what we're talking about, where, having your circumstances empower you, because the feedback from the world is in your circumstances, but who you are is what you're going to do next. Right. But we think that we live as though we are our circumstances. We live as though we are our bank account. We live as though literally, if we haven't got enough money, we say we can't do something. And, it literally just we cut off possibility right there, because if we have a fixed idea about how something's going to turn out, then we're shutting out all of the different ways with which a potential outcome could be delivered to us.
And the universe is always conspiring.
Always.
I believe there are so many possibilities. But like you were saying, if you're fixed about how you're going to get there, even though the possibilities are going to still be there, you won't see them. Yeah. Or even
fixed about where it is you're going. Yeah. I mean, really, you have an idea about your next move, nothing else. And, like the information gets delivered to you, the information about your next step, should I say. This is when we talk about the universal GPS, right? So the information, just like a normal GPS system that tells you when it's time to turn right, it tells you to turn right. But the point, what makes that work is the fact that it only tells you what you need to know at the time you need to know it. And it's the same with the universal GPS. It's like you take one step, and then you receive the information about what's next, not before. Because the point is, the world's a different place, like from 5 minutes ago.
Well, and you are different.
Yes.
You are different. So we created the Polaris game to support us in our own growth. And, one of the biggest, I just say the things that we felt like we needed the most are what are the foundation of what the Polaris game is.
Yeah, what it's become and where it's going as well, because it's continuously evolving as well. It's gathered, it's taken on a life of its own, hasn't it? Because we've allowed the Polaris game to be a conversation.
Right. Yeah. So one of those things is to increase our awareness about who we've been being, that is getting us the results that we don't want.
Yeah.
And beginning to separate who we're being from who we really are. And again, that's where we have felt like we've gotten so much direction from having a purpose, at knowing what our purpose is and knowing what our values are.
Vision. Yeah.
And yes, having the highest vision for our lives, but to really important to see who you've actually been being that is getting you the results that you don't want. And we've had plenty of results that we don't want. I still have results that I don't want.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So this is not, I'm just saying that to say that it's real. Like, it's just in the moment and it's always supporting us.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, let's take a moment to illustrate where we are in our lives right now. It's like there's debt, there's a lack of income, there is the need to grow our business, and a feeling of a lack of knowledge of how to do that sometimes. There's all these things that could be in our way. We have families to support with, very little coming in money wise, very little. It's very scary to sort of imagine, that going on forever and ever. But of course that isn't going to be the case, because, we are following that calling irrespective of what our circumstances look like. And it is very real, because continuously myself and me and you, don't we, Tiff? We're always needing to check in with each other, because this is very real for us. We often get really freaked out by this. And it can be scary, and it can be upsetting, and it can really take us down sometimes. It's, as human beings, it's not easy. It's not easy, but the thing is, I've been saying, to my partner, I don't know when the real results are coming, as in, when this business is really going to take off, or when the money's coming in. All I know is that I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. And that I just need to keep moving forward. Right. And I know that you feel very much the same,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can say with absolute confidence that feeling that there's more for me in life, I don't have that anymore.
Right.
And that is a real indicator to me that I'm moving in the right direction. So
you're in the right place. You're on your way home, right?
Yes. Yeah. And again, to kind of go back to, a goal is a place to come from, not a place to get to, is another big part of how we support ourselves, because if we're aware of who we're being, that's getting us the results that we don't want, right? Then the question becomes, well, who do I need to be to get the results that I do want?
Yeah.
And so it's another big piece of what we do inside the Polaris game is create a game that allows us to live into the next best version of ourselves on a daily basis.
That's where the fun really starts. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then the cherry on top, really, for that, for me, which is, it's something that can be incorporated into your game, but you don't have to have it to play, is to take the deeper discoveries and uncover your purpose and uncover your core values, and have a mission statement and a vision statement for your life. Because again, what those things have done is, for me personally, has been to remove the doubt of who I am.
Right.
So I don't feel wishy-washy and feeling excited about something and then,
because your values and your purpose aren't something you choose, are they? They're not words that you just pick out of the air because you like the sound of them. Like, oh yeah, I like the sound of being someone who's like this or whatever. I like the sound of having all these different values as my core values. These aren't things that you choose. These are things that are based in evidence. These are things that reveal themselves throughout the history of your life, and that also reveal to you going forward who you really are in response to circumstances. And when you know that, when you know who you're called to be, no matter what shows up, fear drops away. Mm-hmm. And the reason why fear drops away is because there are no scary situations. What's scary is that we don't know who we're called to be in the face of that situation. Yes. We don't know who we are. That's what's scary. The situation itself is just a situation like any other. And yet certain situations come up that just remind us that we don't know who we are in the face of that. And then having this in place is our purpose and our values and our vision. These are things that we can realign with when times get tough, to bring us back into alignment and to remember who we are, because that is based in evidence. That isn't something that we've chosen, and nor is it something that somebody else has chosen for us. This is something that life has shown us is true. It's it's empirical, and I think that that's a very important point to make. There's empirical evidence of it, and it isn't decided by the wants and desires of any person.
Yeah, I feel like you've really just wrapped that up so nicely. So what I want to invite everybody to do is to continue this conversation with us. Yeah. We want to invite you to jump over to the Follow the Calling podcast community on Facebook. And we will be continuing this conversation. And you can find that link in the show notes of this episode. And of course, as always, if you like this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would be really, really grateful.
Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to continuing that conversation. We're intending that that's going to be a very highly interactive space where, anyone's free to ask questions. Anyone's free to open whatever conversation they feel fit around, what the things that we talk about in this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to engaging in there.
Yeah. And then in the Facebook community, actually, there will be more of us speaking about this as well. Yeah. So we'll see you guys there, and we'll see you guys next time on Follow the Calling.
Lovely. Cheers, Tiff.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you for showing up for yourself and exploring this space with us. We are a stand for you to follow your calling, whatever that might be.
Be sure to subscribe, and if you're interested in playing with the concepts we share on this podcast and you'd like to continue this conversation with us, we invite you to join us in the Follow the Calling podcast community on Facebook, and you can find the link for that in the show notes.